The severe setup is here ahead of UFC's latest trip to the Apex this weekend. Jared Cannonier versus Xiao Borralho in the main event. Angie Hill versus Tabitha Ritchie, your co-main event. We have the tough finales. Yeah, obviously at the time of recording this, we do not know who is in the featherweight final. We do have Ryan Loader versus Robert Valentine. Sure of enough, another couple of fights will be added onto that card as well. Not a great card overall. We're not going to spend a little bit of time, or we're not going to spend too much time on that. We're going to talk a little bit about the. Forgive me, Sean and Graham. I know we don't talk about this, but it's Harry's last day. We got to get him talking about a little bit of BJJ. I'm curious to hear this about myself and what it means for the scene. Obviously, Craig Jones Invitational went head to head with the ADCC Championships this weekend. This is Harry's last severe setup. We're going to give him a little bit of time just to let everybody know what's happening with him and why he is taking a step away from mixed martial arts media at the end of this. It's a severe setup. How are you, good sir, Harry Powell? Not the best of UFC cards to see off, good sir.
Sure. Look, maybe this is. It's perfect in a way because we'll get to it at the end, and I don't really want to talk about it, but you're going to make me talk about it anyway. There's lots of reasons why I'm sort of stepping away from MMA, and lots of reasons that we'll obviously get into as we go on. But certainly one of the reasons is sort of my love for MMA has kind of diminished a little, and it's cards like this to sort of elevate that and so illuminate that. Sorry, and so. I agree, not the best card, but you enticed me, right? You said we're going to talk about CJR. You told me we're going to talk about ADCC, and so
I had to butter you up somewhere, man, to get you in for this one.
Here. Fucking can't wait. Let's go. Let's fucking go.
Well, let's start on a negative one. Let's talk about Cannonier versus Borralho first. Anyway, if anyone wants to kind of stay tuned in for the BJJ talk and what else, yeah, that's up to them. But we'll get the MMA stuff out of the way. But I would recommend you staying in for the BJJ stuff and to give Harry the proper send off that he deserves. Jared Cannonier versus Xiao Borralho. Big chance here for Borralho, Harry, to get up into the upper echelons of the divisions, really. And this is something that the UFC has been trying to manifest for Xiao Borralho in recent fights, as well as his rise has risen up the 185-pound division, coming up through the Contender Series in 2021. Was thrust into the co-main event slot from the get-go here. It was actually a big topic of conversation here that we had on the Sphere setup was why UFC would do a thing like that. And the reason why we did say there was because they wanted to put him in that prominent spot and build him up for moments like this, coming in against former title challenger Jared Cannonier. It'll be interesting to see if he gets it done. I do not have the confidence in his ability to get it done against Jared Cannonier, even with Cannonier in the twilight stages of his career, coming off the loss against Nasruddin Imamov. I do think he still should have enough to get Xiao Borralho out of here, Harry.
You fucking hope so, don't you? Like, you and I have talked ad nauseum now that it feels like Xiao Borralho's career has been architected to this point. It's one of those ones where the UFC need to show that there is benefit and willing when it comes to the Contender Series. And so Xiao Borralho looks the part. Certainly, he's got tattoos. He looks in good shape. He talks the part, etc., etc. And so you put him in some fights, 6 fights now in the UFC, where he hasn't really been dramatically tested. The sort of level of competition hasn't shot up insanely, but now you're damn fucking right that it has, right? It's similar, we talked about it, it's similar to the Paddy Pimblett, right? Where you stumble him along and you stumble him along and you stumble him along, and eventually you're going to have to test him. Eventually you are going to have to test him. Paddy got his test, passed it. Xiao Borralho now has his test. Jared Cannonier, massive man, big hitter, can be voluminous, can do a bit of everything. Tough to take down, which is obviously where Xiao Borralho is strongest. Interesting fight in terms of a stylistic matchup, but more interesting in that they've chosen, once again, a fighter in the twilight of his career, ex-title challenger, guy that is known in the scene to be in and around the upper echelons. They're trying their best to give Xiao Borralho the rub.
Yeah, indeed they are, and it'll be interesting to see. Look, nothing's beyond the realms of possibility here, but Jared Cannonier is a tough cookie to crack. Borralho obviously does have his BJJ credentials, has shown a little bit on the feet, but Cannonier is not easy to take down. But it's interesting in some regards to see if Borralho can get himself to the level to get over a guy like Jared Cannonier. And I think, look, if he did, with all due respect to Cannonier, it's something that the middleweight division needs now, is a little bit of fresh blood up at the top of the division. So that's the main event in the Apex this weekend. Co-main event, Angie Hill versus Tabitha Ritchie. Angie coming in off of a really, really good win, in my opinion, over Liliana Pinheiro. Picked up a good win over Denise Gomez as well, two kind of up-and-coming prospects in the strawweight division, Harry. Tabitha Ritchie has shown a rich vein of form recently herself, coming off of a win over Tisha Pennington in her last fight, obviously off a loss from Lupitina Gomez. But this is an interesting stylistic matchup, and one that I think we both can be confident to say will probably go all the way and be a super close fight.
Yeah, I mean, probably. Angie is, to be honest, investing in herself skills-wise very, very well. She's working with J-Flow Judo a lot. She's obviously got the sort of Muay Thai background that's been sort of the staple of her career, the staple of her skill set, for a long time. But it does feel like, even at her age, one second, I'm just going to pull up how old she is, even at 39 years of age, right? Even at a UFC record of 12-13, she is still doing her best to add to her achievements. She is still doing her best to add to her skill set. She's still doing her best to be the best fighter she can be. And she should be rewarded with positions like this, right? She should be rewarded with spots like this, fights like this. As you say, it will be interesting in terms of a stylistic perspective. Angie, is she going to be able to keep the fight on the feet? If not, are we going to see some judo reversals? Are we going to see some interesting get-ups? Are we going to see some more submission attempts? Obviously, she got that submission there in her last performance, and that's her first submission win in the UFC. She was really desperate to get hold of that, and she got it. So, yeah, mad props to both fighters. It'll be interesting to see how it goes down.
Indeed. I'll speak a little bit about the next fight, Ryan Loader versus Robert Valentin, two of the middleweight finalists from The Ultimate Fighter. Obviously, we do have a featherweight final as well, which will be confirmed and will have already been confirmed at the time you're listening to this, but unfortunately not at the time that we have been recording this. We do this at the start of the week. If you want to get a full breakdown and a full recap of the entire season, obviously myself and Theo started off the season. He kept the reins going with the tough recaps while I was away. I will be back for the last episode. We recap the season. We look ahead to these two fights as well. But in short, Ryan Loader, Robert Valentin, very interesting stylistic matchup. Loader coming in as a kind of wrestler, D1 wrestler, has had some success there, but showed some good striking on the feet. Obviously, defeated Team KF's Omran Shaban in the semi-finals of the Ultimate Fighter. Robert Valentin, who defeated Paddy McCurry. So both of these guys coming off the back of wins with ties to Irish gyms. Valentin is kind of the story of the season, really. He's a guy who is very outspoken, picked up a lot of friends in there, ended up cornering guys. A really, really good character, really interesting character. And a very well-rounded guy too. And I like this matchup. It's going to be interesting. I do fancy Robert Valentin to get the win. I think he's a little bit more well-rounded, but Loader is also like pretty decent, well-rounded as well. Interesting to see how that goes down. We shall move on, and I will bring Harry back in for this fight. And this is a tasty one, if I do say so myself. Michael Morales versus Neil Magny. And we see this guy, Neil Magny, in here again, Harry. We've spoken about it time and time again about Neil Magny and his willingness to put himself in there with these absolute killers. 16-0 Michael Morales comes in here to try and beat the savvy veteran. How do you see this one going down?
I mean, look, at this point, I think when we use Neil Magny as a sort of a term of reference, as an adjective, almost, the Neil Magny, right? It's starting to dwindle. He's 37 years of age. He is 40 fights into his career. 41st fight will be against Michael Morales. Michael Morales, very young, very hungry, very athletic, very quick, very powerful. Is someone that does need some experience, right? Is someone that does still at 16-0 have some green elements to his game. And so I completely understand why the name Neil Magny is there. I'm just not necessarily sure that the value that the name actually holds is there. Don't get me wrong, Neil Magny might prove me wrong, right? His last fight against Mike Malott was just a fantastic win. Big upset.
Very
Mike
good.
Malott, again, a guy that we were really, really high on. And that was 7 months ago. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
lots
and when you look at Neil Magny as well, it's like you see the guys that he's lost to over in recent years. His last loss, obviously, to Machado Gary. Um, Picked up a loss to Gilbert Burns, Shavkat Rachmanov, Michael Chiesa way back in 2021. Obviously, maybe not to the same level as what the previous three. So, if you're getting a win over Neil Magny, even though he is getting on and it might not be the same, a win over him might not be the same as it was maybe a couple of years ago, that you're going to be a decent prospect, and you could go and do things within the welterweight division with a win over him. Interesting to see. I'm excited. I'm always excited to see Mike Morales come in here. And I tell you, if he's not on his game, I don't think he gets it done in this fight, to be honest. But yeah, we shall see. Moving on down the rest of the card, there's nothing really too much to write home about. We do have Edmund Shabazian against Gerald Meerschaert in the 185-pound division. Obviously, Shabazian picking up a win over AJ Dobson, snapping a 1-4 kind of a streak before that, where it wasn't looking great against higher level competition. Against Gerald Meerschaert, you would arguably say it is a good bit of a step up from AJ Dobson, and we'll kind of see where he's at. But he's a guy, obviously, Meerschaert coming in off a win of Brian Barberena. This is not really it's a nothing fight, really. I mean, with Edmund Shabazian, we're going to find out if he's slowly coming back to where he should be, or where we at least think he should be. A kind of a guy whose career has been mismanaged in the UFC to some regards, and on paper, this looks like a good fight for what it's worth, Harry.
Meerschaert is slow, he's older, but he's a boa constrictor if he gets you on the ground. And really, this is a nice fight for Edmund Shabazian, who's younger, longer, hits harder, quicker, and should be able to keep the fight standing. If he can keep the fight standing, he'll decimate Gerald Meerschaert. If he can't keep the fight standing, he loses for sure.
Indeed. The rest of the card, nothing really to write home about. We have Vladislav Borshev versus James Lontop, and really nothing else to write home about. We shall be breaking down this card next week. Who will be there is yet to be seen, but we will have the balance breakdown on this card. Yeah, obviously we'll discuss the structure of the Severe setup and the balance breakdown towards the end of this podcast. But first, going to go against the grain here. We don't normally talk anything outside of mixed martial arts, but as a Brazilian jiu-jitsu enthusiast and a guy who was looking from the outside in last weekend, Christmas came early for Harry Powell, I believe. We had the Craig Jones Invitational going head-to-head with the ADCC Championships. For anyone who's not too familiar with the Brazilian jiu-jitsu scene, obviously the ADCC, a lot of people I've heard describe, Harry, as the Olympics of Brazilian jiu-jitsu in some regards. Had a bit of competition this year in Craig Jones, who created his own tournament over 2 nights. Kind of explain the structure of the Craig Jones Invitational against the ADCC and the overall meaning for the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu scene. All roads are leaning for it to be a good thing for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu overall, Harry.
Possibly, right? Like, this sort of birthed because the ADCC has teamed up with Flow Grappling, who are a media organization. The Flow Grappling and Craig Jones sort of fell out over a number of different reasons. One of those was pay, right? ADCC has historically not paid their athletes to show, and they have paid them $10,000 if they win. Now, that's obviously an egregiously low amount of money. If you think that ADCC is once every 4 years, once every 2 years, and those 2 years, you might become the best grappler in the world, right? At your weight class, the best grappler in the world. The trials in order to get into ADCC are arguably harder than the ADCC is itself. ADCC is over 2 days. You would have a round of 16, a quarterfinals, a semifinals, and a finals. So that's 4 matches that you might have to win 10,000. In trials, you might have 10 matches to win trials on one day, right? So and they're against the best people in the country, right? Anyone that's got a passport that's able to enter specific trials, they can enter them. So just a gargantuanly grueling event to qualify for, and then obviously to win at your weight classes is really, really
just 10,000 for the winner there.
Just 10,000 for the winner, yeah. The winner of the fight gets 50 grand.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right.
And nonetheless, in comes Craig Jones with some big money.
Yeah, so Craig Jones basically for the last little while has sort of turned to be as counterculture as possible. In some ways, really egregiously, and I think we'll maybe touch on the marketing that I didn't approve of coming in here. But he said to ADCC, "You should pay the athletes more." ADCC effectively said, "Fuck you, we'll do what we want. We're ADCC." Craig said, "Grand, I'm going to go and make my own promotion, and I'm going to rival you." So he created Craig Jones Invitational. The structure was an under 80 kilo bracket and an over 80 kilo bracket, 16 guys in both. And every athlete would be paid $10,001 to turn up, right? So already that's more than you're going to get to win ADCC by $1, right? And you're sort of seeing where the memery, the trolling elements of the marketing is coming. But then the winner gets $1 million, right? Now that is obviously life-changing money for an athlete. It is life-changing money for the sport. It is drastically different than what we have seen previously. And it's huge. Like for the scene, it is huge because, and this is not confirmed, this is just rumors, but the ADCC lost 2 ADCC reigning champions to the CJI Invitational. And so they began to start paying members of the brackets to stay and compete for ADCC. Now, if that's true, then the Craig Jones Invitational immediately has sort of won, quote unquote, because the ADCC has had to start paying athletes to stay and compete. Maybe that sticks around. Maybe it doesn't. I fear that we're going to see sort of a Dana White-ism happen here where athletes are going to be shunned from ADCC. And there's a massive question as to Craig can run this thing again. We don't know whether there's a profit made, a loss made. We don't know who the backers are. We don't know where this money is coming from, let alone the money to pay the athletes, the couple of mil that it's taken, in prize money and everything else, but running the event, putting the event on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But overall, in terms of the actual grappling, we were incredibly spoiled across both events. Just insane levels of talent, insane levels of performances from everyone. It was, it was a fantastic weekend.
I heard some Craig Jones coming out and criticizing ADCC, who brought John Jones to the event. We've seen John Jones tweeting and Instagramming about him being at the event, and Craig Jones came up with the accusation that ADCC had paid John Jones $50,000 to go in there. And I guess my question is, why not put that back into the athletes? If you're saying that you can only afford to pay a guy 10,000 for going through 2 years of grueling competition to get to the pinnacle, why not put that back into the athletes? It seemed like a little bit of negative kind of PR for the ADCC, but you said that you had some grievances with the way Craig Jones was kind of promoting his event as well at the same time.
Yeah, so Craig is a guy that sort of inherently looks at shock value for everything, right? Like during the Ukraine war, he went to Ukraine. Now he did, on the back of it, he did a ton of loads of amazing charity work, loads of free seminars to get gyms money and this and that and the next thing. But the face of it, it was a lot of very tongue-in-cheek, very slapstick, sometimes very, very coarse humor that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. On the Craig Jones Invitational, he had a match against the winningest female of all time, Gabby Garcia. Like the way that was promoted, like Craig got a Gabby Garcia tattoo on him at the weigh-ins. Craig effectively sexually assaulted Gabby Garcia by
I saw that. Wasn't good.
Which is horrendous. And then it was promoted as like jovial banter and whatever. That to me is horrifically wrong stuff. I understand why he's doing what he's doing. I understand that, he understands that no press is bad press, right? And all press is good press. But I think there is there is a weird thing happening at the moment in the sport where you have Gordon Ryan, who's like known as the greatest of all time, and he is out here with his very wacky political and socioeconomic opinions, and it's extremely public about them, and sort of that brings a stain to the sport in terms of its apex personality not necessarily being the best person in the world. And the number two being Craig Jones has sort of stooped to this sort of quite an ethical level at times in order to promote this event against the ADCC. And it feels almost like two dirty brushes fighting against each other. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it does. And it kind of like that kind of carry on as well. It kind of goes against the original ethics of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and it's, you know, a lot of respect and really kind of old martial art that's gone back many, many years. And, you know, obviously look at in modern day, you got to be a little bit outrageous when you're doing it, but like there has to become a line, I would say, and how you promote certain things. And obviously look at from a guy who doesn't know too much and is not as engrossed in Brazilian jiu-jitsu as I am. Like I seen a lot more about the Craig Jones Invitational this week than I did with the ADCCs. Didn't really I watched a couple of clips here and there, but didn't really see anything you know, from the ADCC side really on socials. It was more like Craig Jones's and some of the excellent grappling. Look, we saw excellent grappling on show. We saw Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu thrust under the spotlight, but I guess, you know, a lot of problems that we are having in combat sports lately is how things are being thrust under the spotlight. And, you know, we have that in MMA. It seems like we have it in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well.
For sure. I mean, like, if we take the positives from the event, right, aside from the money, Craig went and he put an arena together, and like it's silly things like this, right? Where the ADCC took the T-Mobile Arena for that weekend, and Craig went and booked the arena that ADCC had last time, right? And he did that because it costs far less than the T-Mobile Arena, and he used that as a stick to beat the ADCC with. Like, all this money I'm not spending on the T-Mobile Arena, I'm going to pay the athletes with, right? So the underhanded shit like that. But anyway, so he takes this arena, he puts the Karate Combat Pit in the middle, which there was a lot of sort of discussion around whether that would work, whether it wouldn't work. What does that mean in terms of the grappling itself? He scored the fights with the 10-point must system. There were 3 5-minute rounds to the grappling, which is a really interesting wrinkle. And the rule set itself worked excellently well. Like, it really forced fighters to push for every 5 minutes. One, because they knew they had a minute break, right? And that was good. But it also meant they're getting scored on that round, right? So fighters were really, really pushing to get dominant positions, scoring positions, etc., or obviously submit their opponent inside those 5 minutes. And so it made for quite an exciting format. Equally, one of the massive problems with IBJJF tournaments, EBI tournaments, ADCC tournaments, whatever the rule set is they have like a flat mat, and a lot of athletes will use the edge of the mat to get resets when they're in bad spots or when they feel like they are in a trouble. Excuse me, just coughing my lungs up there. What the pit allowed for is you can't escape, right? You cannot escape from the action. And you saw some athletes be very creative where naturally, right, the match is going to move around, right? The match is going to move around. That's just how that's going to happen. In some of the standing exchanges, guys would end up near the pit and they'd use the pit, right? A gentleman called William Tackett, he used the pit to jump on a guy called Pedro Rocha's back, right? Joao Pedro Rocha's back. Like, that's just a cool, interesting, new development that you don't necessarily see. It's very hard to achieve that in a cage, right? It's very hard to use the cage to jump on somebody's back unless your back's already to the cage. It's very hard to do that in a traditional grappling setting. So the rule set, the way in which it's a brand new event, there's a lot of hype around it. And so that's probably why we're seeing more of it. Whereas ADCC is, very, very, very established already. But I was impressed with the production. I was impressed with the rule set. I was impressed with the interesting newness of the rule set and how the pit worked for grappling and how it stopped stalling and didn't stop stalling, but it makes stalling much, much harder. And there weren't the constant resets. There was like a constant flow of action. That was great, right? Like, it was really, really good. I'd like to see more of that in grappling, but maybe with some cleaner ethical marketing next time.
100%. Look, you can tell with the passion in your voice and how you explain that so excellently of your undivided love for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Harry. And it's that undivided love that has brought you to the decision to step away from mixed martial arts media as well. It saddens me to say we scraped the surface with it on the balance breakdown at the end of that, as well as of your decision. to step away from Severe MMA and from covering mixed martial arts, and your excellent input through the Severe Spotlight coming on with me, the Balance Breakdown and everything like that, and Severe Setup, obviously on the Patreon as well with Shawnee, for Speaker's Corner. Your input and your influence on me and Severe MMA has been excellent over the last number of years, ever since we started doing this long time ago, almost 4 years to the day, really, since we first got together for a podcast. We've done many more since then, and it's been quite enjoyable for me. But look, things change, circumstances change, and you've made the decision to step away. And look, I know you don't like talking about it too much, but I think we want to give you the send off that you deserve, and we want you to just kind of lay out your opinion on the decision that you've made.
Sure. So when I started covering MMA, I started covering MMA purely as a fan. I had a podcast called All About Balance, and me and a couple of guys that I watched MMA with, we had these conversations offline, and we said, fucking hell, like this is decent. Like we could probably record this and it might be fun to do that, right? And we all put way too much effort in, way too much time in. We spent, one of the guys had 2 kids, another guy was going through uni at the time, I had a full-time job, and we spent far too fucking long prepping for those podcasts. They got like 6 views and whatever, but we had a great time, right? Like there was a really good crack between the 3 of us, a really good chemistry. And I'd been following, when you get into a sport, when you get into a thing, you sort of find your niche, you find your corner of people that you enjoy, personalities that you enjoy outside the sport. And I found my niche in SevereMMA amongst a couple of others. And I'd been following Shawnee, the big podcast, Graham, for a long time. And then this fella called Ian started popping up, and I really enjoyed the way he thought, really enjoyed the way he wrote. I really enjoyed the articles that he put out and the stuff that he was doing. And so I reached out and I said, do you want to do a podcast? And that was the, sort of the birth of everything that has happened over the last four years. And we did a number of episodes together. I was very fortunate to interview Shawnee on All About Balance, still one of my favorite interviews that we have done. And I remember at the time he said to me, I've got 40 minutes. And I said, cool. And he said that now, knowing him as a friend, he said that I said it because I didn't know who you were, right? I was like, well, I'll give this lad 40 minutes and we'll see where we go. And at the end of the 40 minutes, he wanted to do another one. I wanted to do another one. And sort of a year later, he came to me and said, is there any chance you'd want to work for SevereMMA? We like what you're doing on the All About Balance thing. And that was like being called up to Manchester United for me. Like that was an absolute dream come true. I couldn't believe that I was getting the opportunity to do this. And I remember running into the bedroom after the conversation with Shawnee, and my wife was there, and we had a celebration, and it was the whole thing. And from that day, I had said to myself that I would never work for another brand if it wasn't another outlet, if it wasn't SevereMMA. I was never in it for the money. I've never been in it for the money. Money's not the thing that sort of drives me to do this. And it was always the love of MMA. And then it just so happened that I became really close friends with yourself and Shawnee and Graham and obviously Spencer along the way. And these people turned into mentors, they turned into friends, and that and sort of the love and passion for MMA and MMA analysis that I had just sort of really sparked the 3 years of just glorious times that I've had at SevereMMA. However, I think the sort of, and I should just give us a second mention to Spencer. I did some work with Spencer over at Keyboard Kimura, and those were really pivotal, really important moments. I was going to get to Spencer later, but I think it's important to just put it in now. Like
100%.
Spencer, as much as Sean and Graham and yourself have been mentors, Spencer has been a huge mentor for me, both in my writing, in my podcasting, and I'm very grateful to call all 4 of you friends offline and online, and I really can't thank any of you enough for that. But I'll just deter back slowly. My love for the sport sort of started to diminish. I found the sport difficult to cover, knowing what the sport actually is outside of the octagon. And Sean and I have covered this ad nauseum on Speaker's Corners, and I've been very candid, and so has Sean, about some of our opinions about fighter pay, fighter health, the way fighters are as humans, the way they're treated, MMA media, all these sorts of things. And, you and I have talked ad nauseum on this podcast, and I've talked on other podcasts. We put in significant amount of hours and effort into covering this sport in a way that we feel is right. And there is a part of me that feels that MMA is going awry in a way that I can't control. And it's very, very difficult for me to stake my name to something that I feel so passionately against in terms of the business of MMA. I probably will love the sport of MMA forever, but the business of MMA is something that has really sickened me over the last year or so. And so that's one driver. The second driver, and I think the driver that's probably more positive and more interesting, is I turned 30 last year and I turned 31 this year. And when I turned 30, I told myself that, I only have a short competitive window in grappling. I got a brown belt from London Grapple, and obviously that means a huge amount to me. And I said that I was going to go and try to compete as much as humanly possible. I was going to put myself out there as much as possible and just see what happens until my body can't do it anymore. And that means a level of dedication that I'm not able to give if I'm doing other things. And, we'll be open about it. The fights happen on a Saturday. I spend most of, if not all of Sunday prepping for podcasts. I write my article either Sunday night or Monday morning before work. I push the article out. The article obviously takes prep as well. Ian and I get together usually at about 11:30 p.m. my time. We record. Obviously, we have a natter and stuff, right? We've got to. But we go to bed my time at 2:30, sometimes 3 in the morning. And that then has a recurring effect on my training throughout the week, on my sleep throughout the week, and on my job throughout the week, right? And so through very pure, very wholesome, very gracious conversations with yourself, Shawnee, Spencer, my wife, my friends that are not MMA related, it just became apparent that if I was going to do this thing, if I was going to give it my all, something had to give. And unfortunately, I need to put food on the table for my wife and my dog and myself. The training is the thing that I'm trying to do in order to give this thing a go. And the other thing I had was SevereMMA. And so I made an extremely tough decision, a decision that left me guilty for months, really, months and months before I even consciously blurted it out. And it was actually Ian who, on the podcast, we had one final discussion about it, and you told me, this is it. Like, you know what you're saying, you just haven't said it out loud. And I was incredibly grateful for that, because I'm not sure I was necessarily strong enough to say it out loud. I really didn't want it to be real. But then when you dragged it out of me in the way that you did, I said it to you, there was relief there. And that was something that left me feeling very, very mixed feelings for many, many weeks. And still, frankly, I feel very, very mixed feelings. I love the people at SevereMMA. I love the time that I've had at SevereMMA. I've just fallen out of love with MMA. And I think for the duty I have to my friends at SevereMMA and the duty I have to the fighters, I have to give this everything. And everything isn't in it anymore. There is a part of me that has turned disdain for the business, and there is a part of me that wants to go and turn grappling into something that I am doing until the wheels fall off. And so for that reason, I've decided to take a step away.
You put yourself first, and that's the thing that you've got to do. And look, at your passion is within Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You're an excellent Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist. You're an excellent Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach. You've been an excellent analyst for SevereMMA for the last number of years. I will miss greatly doing this with you. And I want to thank you. You gave me the chance lots and lots of years ago. You instilled confidence in me. You still do to this day, and that means a lot to me as well. So, you've been a great colleague. You've been a better friend. And look, we lose you as a colleague, but gladly we don't lose you as a friend. And I'm glad of that. I just want to say thanks for all the sacrifice that you've made and staying up late to record the breakdowns and the severe setups. For the last number of years. We'll stay going with this. We'll stay going with the breakdown, but you'll be missed, good sir. It's been a pleasure being with you and breaking down fights for the last number of years. And I hope you go and take legs and arms from every kind of fella out on the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu scene and go where you deserve to go in there as well. We wish you well, Harry, for your future endeavors, and we will love and miss you always, my friend.
Sure. Look, I love you very much. There is absolutely no need to thank me for confidence. I've said this offline and I'll say it online, so there's a record forever. You are one of the best in the world at what you do, and you just have to understand that that's the truth. SevereMMA is undoubtedly so lucky to have somebody of your passion, of your work ethic, of your work rate. And I think they know that, right? Otherwise, you know, you wouldn't be fucking Ian O'Neill, but you are, right? And I couldn't be more proud of where you are. I was watching our first podcast today, and I couldn't be prouder of the difference in who you were then and who you are now. And you know, I'll say it again. There's only a couple of people in this world that I'd stay up till 3 a.m. for every fucking week,
100%.
and you are fucking one of them. And you know, if I am fortunate enough to make some of the grappling stages that I am hoping to make, I will make sure that there is a SevereMMA logo on a rash guard somewhere. So
I love it. I love it. All the best to you, Harry Powell. And yeah, like I said, you're a great man. We will be talking offline, but for the listeners, it'll be the last time you see Harry on the Severe setup. Won't say it'll never be again, but for now, for the foreseeable future, that's it. That's been the Severe setup. That's been Harry Powell. That's me, Ian O'Neill. Go over and follow him still at BJJ_Harry Powell. He might not be lashing out as much content anymore, but definitely go and follow Balance Grappling on Instagram. That's where he does all of his video breakdowns, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu breakdowns, and they are fantastic. Talk to you the next time. Take care. Love you, Harry. All the best to you, good sir.